Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. My name is Yogesh Chavda. I'm the founder of Y2S Consulting, and I'm also the host of this little podcast called Next Frontier in Insights. Today, we have two wonderful guests from Europe coming in. We have Alessia and Martina, who work with the Trybes agency. I'm going to have them introduce themselves in a second, but I just want everybody to know that I met them about a month ago, and I was so blown away with the conversation that I was like, there's no way I'm not having them on the podcast. They have to come to the podcast. So here we are. So, Alicia, welcome. Martina, welcome.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Yogesh. We are honored actually to be here with you. And, we enjoyed so much the first conversation. So we could go for hours. So I know that I need to keep it brief. I'm Alessia Clusini. I'm the CEO of Trybes Agency. I'm also a digital ethnographer. More on that soon.
And I am Martina. I am the consumer psychology lead at Trybes. I'm also a partner at Trybes, and I'm so glad to be here. Thanks, Yogesh, for having us.
Fantastic. So, before we go into the conversation itself, I would just like both of you to give me a little bit of background about the two of you. What's your journey that got you to where you are today? Just, very briefly, I'll start with you, Martina, first. What got you to where you are today?
It's actually a funny story because me and Alessia met 11 years ago this year. She was a teacher at a postgraduate master I was doing in fashion, which is completely different from my study path, which was in psychology. And when we met, I clicked with her and I just chased her to try and work with her. And because I was fascinated by the work she was doing while she was teaching us during the week, and she told us that she had this idea of creating an agency that would have done what actually Trybes is doing right now. And I was like, I want to work with her. So I kind of chased her, and she's going to give you her version, of course. But we ended up, after 11 years, becoming partner. I'm so honored, and I'm so grateful every day for this opportunity. So I got this amazing opportunity of coming together with my psychological study and then going deep into digital ethnography and everything, and then social studies and culture study and everything that we are doing right now. So it's mind-blowing for me still today.
Amazing. And where do you live, Martina?
I live in Lucca on the Tuscan hills. I'm pretty lucky in that.
Yeah,
it's a nice, beautiful day outside.
There you go. There you go. Very envious already. Very envious. So, and how about you, Lisa? Tell us your journey.
How much time do you have? I've got, it's not a straight line. It's a very, but I have a background in fashion. That's why I met Martina as well. I was a fashion designer, a successful one, and then the fashion world changed so much because of fast fashion entering the room. So essentially, I had to change career. I also went abroad for the first time. I didn't speak any English. I started living in Australia. I didn't know anybody there. It was just such a decision. And, I started building quite by chance, actually, my background in marketing back then. And then I saw that after a few years working in marketing with actually quite big clients at the very beginning, I saw that the most important factor that could move the needle was the audience understanding, the audience analysis. And so it was the very beginning of social intelligence and ethnography. So digital ethnography was just an academic, I don't want to, it's beautiful and amazing, but it was a bit like, in academia. So I was one of the first few people to bring it to practitioners and the research. And then the rest is history. We studied tribes and communities and the cultural codes and so on. I'm very excited. I do actually wake up every day excited to work, believe it or not.
Yeah. Amazing. And where are you based?
So I'm based in London, but I have a second house in Tuscany as well, because I'm
Mhm.
from Tuscany, like Marty. And so I often go there. I'm right now in Tuscany as well, so I can confirm it's nice and springish.
Amazing, amazing. Well, listen, that's fantastic. So I wanted to first start by, like just level setting, for the audience. You talked about ethnography was one word you use, but you're also like, human behavior scientist, right? That's kind of like the starting point, right? So explain to us what is the difference between what you do versus what is considered to be traditional market research.
Yeah, I should start by saying, Yogesh, that we don't replace traditional market research methodologies.
Hmm.
We augment them. In fact, we work also with both market research firms and also brands and companies
Hmm.
to essentially help them go beyond the notion of users, consumers, and look at people as complex entities in their social, emotional, psychological, and cultural context. So I often use this metaphor that if you want to build a rocket, you call the rocket scientist. And if you want to build great products and services for people, you actually call anthropologists and psychologists. So you have to call us.
Amazing, amazing. So let's double click into that. So you're saying that for a reason because you feel that if with your backgrounds you're able to tap into consumer psychology in a slightly different way. So talk to us about what that is. What's that different way that you're doing that others are not doing?
I think what we can, Mati can actually expand on this.
Mhm.
The usual what people feel versus what they say, that sort of data gap. Mati, do you want to
Mhm.
pick up on this? It's your background, so I don't want to.
Yeah, what we do actually is that, as Alessia was saying, we take into account the complexity of people. So instead of going for what people perform like
Mhm.
for example, on social media, we study social media, but we also know that people on social media are not going to express the real version of themselves. They are going to show the best version of
Mhm.
themselves.
Mhm.
And that's not actually what we want to see there. I mean, it's very useful. It's a lot of data what you can get from observation, and that's part of what we do.
Mhm.
But then we use that data to feed into the rest of our journey with the consumers and the audience we are going to take. And we apply ethnographic and psychological methodology to get deeper inside
Mhm.
those perspectives and those complexities, because we just don't want to see the surface. We want to go
Mhm.
way beyond that. But when you do it, we strongly believe that you have to be scientific about
Mhm.
it. You can
Mhm.
just go around and probe people with questions or surveys or stuff. You can do that, but you also need to be very careful on the scientific side. And what amazed me when I started working with Alessia was the fact that she was always involving a big team of scientists, of nerds, if you may, in all those fields, to make sure that all parts of research were accounted for by figures that could actually have a say on that, and not just and I don't want to offend anyone here, not just marketers for the sake of being a marketer, but marketers with background in those scientific field.
Understand. But the thing that really caught my attention when I talked to the two of you was the fact that you have been applying this background and your methodologies specifically in the space of taboos and stigma, right? So, what caught your attention in that space? Because that's a passion area of mine. I already explained that to you, when we were talking a month ago. And for the benefit of the audience, I had worked in the hearing aids business for a couple of years, and that's where I completely got fascinated by the concept of stigma and the implications it has on brands. So I've always been looking for people who have a similar passion in that space, and I found the two of you talking about that as well. So tell me what got you into this particular space of taboos and stigma.
I would start by saying what got us there, and then I want to be really pragmatic here because
Yeah.
I'm conscious of the fact that the audience, your audience, is
Mm.
they all know what we're talking about. So
Yeah.
I want to give them actual tools. We started by addressing that complexity by not wanting to stop at what is represented,
Hmm.
what we represent of ourselves, right?
Yeah.
And the stigma is everywhere. We've been talking about parenting,
Hmm.
um, you know, and the fact that there's many categories, many products that are associated with stigma. We all have to breastfeed. So God forbid, what they're going through, the brands that they are selling formula, right?
Hmm.
Or what about snacks for kids, right?
Hmm.
They all have to be perfect, organic, homemade, even. Like imagine everybody that is working these days that have to bake, and so on,
Hmm.
because of the stigma associated. And what about screen time? Let's not get started on that.
Yeah.
But I would say that stigma is literally everywhere. If I represent myself now, let's make it a little bit of a joke. Like,
Hmm.
I just met you, Yogesh, and
Yeah.
and I tell you, oh, what's your lifestyle, Alessia? And I go like, I wake up in the morning and I have mindfulness session, and then I go for a run, and then I have an organic breakfast, and of course I start working, but I have a perfect, work-life balance, and then
Hmm.
I pick up my kid and I have a quality time. No screen at all. I never shout, and then I meet my husband, and we don't watch, Netflix at all. We just talk about philosophy and so on and so forth, right? So what's true about that? Pretty much nothing. Uh,
Hmm.
Everything, literally everything that is outside this funny portrait that I just gave you is somehow stigmatized because it doesn't comply. So
Hmm.
here now to Marty, if you want to just actually get into the taboo topic protocol, which is what we use to get to the truth of people and go beyond this surface that I just dramatized here for the sake of the time together.
Yeah, the fact is that you can just go, as I was saying before, you can just go around. You can just go to people and ask them what are the things you feel stigmatized about. Or on the other hand, you can just ask them questions like, how do you feel about sex right now? Or how do you feel about death right now?
Hmm.
To name just the big one. So what we have worked a lot on
Hmm.
was to create these overarching frameworks that we now call the taboo topic protocols, to make it like so that whenever in whatever touch point we have with people, customers or other people or the audience at large, we are about to, one, make them feel safe with us, with the team or whoever is going to interact with them, and two, to actually observe and understand how they feel. And that comes back to all the techniques that we are able to use because we are nerds and scientists, basically. And that's where the taboo topics protocol came about. It's not just a bunch of questions that you ask people. It's not, I mean, there are questions, but
Of
it's
course.
not just that
Yeah.
type of protocol. It's a whole encompassing journey that you need to take. And
Hmm.
as Alessia was saying, it's not just the big ones of the taboos you can think about. It's also, everyday life is full
Hmm.
of things that we may not be thinking about as stigmatized, but they actually are stigmatized. So,
Yeah.
tread lightly with everything you come across.
Well, so some of the work I've been doing over the last, couple of years, right, is that when you bring in the concept of stigma, there is, it can apply to products, it can apply to situations. You talked about sex or death, those are situations. It can also apply to communities, right? And right now, I don't want to go into the political space, so but there are communities that are getting stigmatized, for example, right? Depending on which part of the world you're in, right? But even if you stay away from the political space, think about even, a community, of how people think about, what is a relationship or a, partnership, right? People have this concept of traditional marriage of, two people. But what happens if there are three people involved? Right? That's stigmatizing too. I had somebody on my podcast last year, Cam Berard, who talks very actively about her relationship structure between her and her two partners, basically. And the conversation was about stigma again and how they were navigating that and how are they living. And the big learning was they were just normal people living a life that is reflective of what made sense for them, right? So I'm just curious when I hear you talk about your protocol, you're actually kind of like establishing trust, it seems like upfront, so that people can open up and talk about with their experiences. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, it is. And trust, and Ale, please add anything that comes to your mind. And trust is such a big topic right now for
Yeah.
a lot of reasons.
Yeah.
But what we want to do essentially is create a setting to talk in psychological terms. We want to create a setting for people.
Mm-hmm.
And if we go into the psychological psychotherapy relationship, which we are not doing here, of course, and that's a big disclaimer. But if we can take something from that, and that's my background, you need to know when you are interacting with someone that you can ask them whatever you want and you can have whatever reaction you want from them. But the type of relationship you build with them, being it, a work relationship or just an interviewee and interviewer relationship, needs to have some basis. Even if they are, just going to go on about for 1 hour or 2 hours. And trust plays a big part. That's why I was saying that the protocols are all encompassing. They are not just for the time of the interview. They are not just, this is a sequence of questions. They need to be in place for us before then for the interview, the interviewees. We need to know, we as a team, and then the people who are conducting research need to know what it takes to conduct those relationship and to be in that relationship. And that's I believe that's foundational for trust.
100%. 100%. So we've talked at a conceptual level so far in terms of the protocol and all that kind of stuff, right? So let's get into some use cases, because I think that will really help bring to life how you're applying your protocol, which is yours, to specific situations that you face. So I understand that one of them was around the mom's guilt, right? So talk to us, give us the context as to what that topic is about and what did you find out using your protocols. I'd just love to hear more about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've done a lot of research on parenting and moms specifically over the years with different markets, different products. And I'm a mom myself. And then what happened was I met with this amazing woman, Leila Green. She's an activist and the founder of this movement, which is called F Mom Guilt, Fuck Mom Guilt. And, she blew my mind because I was able to connect the dots of what we were ethnographically observing for years into something that is also been in an economic force, essentially. So people don't buy products that are socially stigmatized for some reasons, right? So I think that was my moment of saying, wow, okay, we're into something big. And it's been great to work with Leila, as in we can approach our work with brands, bringing our insights from tribes and communities of consumers, but also activating on these insights with somebody that is an insider. So she can help, gathering the messages, doing the visuals, helping create something that truly resonates and it goes beyond the taboo. And I think one thing that might be, I don't know, might be obvious, but I just want to state it here, is the fact that it's not about, the first rule about taboos is acknowledging the taboos.
Yes.
Marty often addresses those, she calls them natural walls that we have. We have those walls and that the stigma lies in there. So
Mhm.
instead of pretending that they are not there, we address them with our protocols. We treat people accordingly, and it works like magic, Yogesh. Like when, beyond the parenting, you name it. If we go into finances, the relationship with money,
Mhm.
uh, how much we drink, how
Mhm.
many sweets we have, what's our relationship with so many other things.
Yeah.
We get at the end, people are truly thankful and they feel like they had the space to break the taboo, if you
Mm.
see what I mean. And there, right there, is when I feel accomplished with my work, actually.
Even though you go through some pretty, gnarly stuff with mums, for example, because talking about mum guilt, it's not just a walk in the park, even though many of them were met at the park in this
Yes.
case.
It would help if you give a very specific example, though. Like, within mom guilt, like, are there like specific situations or experiences that either drive mom guilt or help, and what does that lead to in terms of behaviors? If you could give an example of that, that would really, I think, help people, wrap their heads around this. I think
Absolutely.
moms will get it immediately, but for guys like me, it might take a second.
Absolutely. Number one, and it's I feel the responsibility of addressing this, even though because it's a stigma, I
Yeah.
have to find the right words. So
Hmm.
I hope nobody in the audience gets offended about this. In the UK, you have to breastfeed. Like there's such an institution and
Hmm.
a series of communities and groups and education around breastfeeding, and there's a lot of science that backs, backs that, Mother Nature sort of approach, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
But some people they can't breastfeed for whatever reason. It's a
Yep.
physical reason, or something happened to them right before the birth or right after,
Yeah.
or the kid doesn't latch or whatever, or
Hmm.
they have to do a mix, right?
Hmm.
Maybe, or they're exhausted and there's not even more nutrition on that.
Yeah.
But that situation is where I see moms don't actually, if they use the formula, they don't tell their friends. They certainly don't brag about it. And so there's a stigma in that.
Hmm.
Uh,
Hmm.
Anything related to food, right? I grew up in the 80s, and I mean, it was a very different world, wasn't it, Yogesh, right?
Yep.
How can you possibly expect that a working mom bakes morning to night
Hmm.
organic food for their kids?
Yeah.
So I'm buying things, but I wouldn't necessarily again share it with my peers,
Yes.
because there is this, you have to, the mom guilt is so big that
Hmm.
you essentially have to disappear as a person and give
Hmm.
everything to your kid,
Hmm.
and anything that makes that life a little bit easier, a little bit more balanced with you as a worker, as a woman, as a wife, as a person, it
Hmm.
just is not in the picture. So mom's guilt is absolutely absolutely a big deal, I would say.
And the interesting thing in what you said is that there are micro behaviors that people do when they're experiencing that, right?
Hmm.
Because they have to decide, I need to work, I need to do what's right for my kid, and I'm worried about how people will judge me,
Yeah.
right? That's where the stigma is coming from. So to
Actually, sorry if I interrupted, to
yeah,
expand on that, it's so internalized that you don't even think of the people judging you. You are judging yourself. I'm
that's
not a
true.
good mother because I'm not a martyr.
Yeah,
Sorry.
so there are actually two different stigmas. So in the work I've been doing, like I call that self stigma, what you just described, where you are stigmatizing yourself because you feel you're less than as a person,
Yeah.
right? And then there's also the other part, which is the perceived stigma that comes from others who judge you, and that also adds to the guilt that's already there, right?
Yeah.
So by unpacking it, the stigmas, the way I just described it, what it does is then it allows us to say, how would we actually then talk to that mom if you are a breast pump brand versus I'm a formula brand? Your
Hmm.
approach has to be extremely different in the example that you gave, right? So that nuance, that understanding at that fundamental level can completely shape how you think about your messaging. Because if you look at the messaging that's out there, 30% more milk if you use a breast pump, or X percent, and these 10 nutrients that you get in your formula.
Mm-mm.
Does she even care about that? Really? I don't think so.
Mm-mm.
you know
Really.
So what the brand is talking about versus what she's actually looking for are two entirely different things.
Yeah, and that's why I think it's very important to get the tribes and communities forerunners, spoke people like Layla, right? You
Hmm.
cannot, if you involve those people that are within the social fabric,
Yeah,
then you understand the social stigma, you understand those dynamics, you understand what people actually care
yeah,
versus what's in the milk, which is probably not the first thing we're looking at. Yeah.
100%. The thing is that a lot of the messaging that brands are doing is very rationally focused,
Mm.
Yeah.
right? Educating people on how to use a breast pump, or how
Mm.
to make sure that the baby is getting this, that, or the other. We're using this as a use case, but this applies to any brand. I
Mm.
could say the same exact thing for hearing aids as an example,
Mm.
with an older audience. But the reality is that this is a very emotional conversation. There's emotion associated with it, with the like you said, the guilt factor on top, right? So to unpack that requires a very different approach in terms of how you think about communication and messaging and content,
Yeah,
that a lot of
absolutely.
these brands don't necessarily tap into. They do it very superficially, is what I
Yeah.
see, at least.
Yeah.
Maybe you're saying something different.
Yeah, and it's like, what's the result of that, Yogesh? They end up being utilities. So
Yeah.
people then they see the marginal price. That's
Mhm.
so they see. All I'm saying is, okay, this is cheaper, this is more expensive.
Yeah.
This looks pink and this looks green, but there's
Mm.
nothing else in that. Well, our decisions are prompted by other feelings, other drivers, right? And
Yeah.
so I think, the whole thing of being socially safe, which is
Mm.
very much what's happening right now,
Mm.
across brands and company.
Mhm.
People say, oh, what's my, differentiation power? How can I position myself? How can I be also socially safe?
Mhm.
Well, my 20 cents to brands, to
Mhm.
CMOs, to inside managers, to CEOs, to
Mhm.
all the leaders is to, in fact, enter those tribes and communities of consumers, hang
Mhm.
out with them,
Mhm.
observe them. If you don't want to do it yourself, you call the anthropologists and the psychologists like us, and
Mhm.
then understand what truly matters beyond the utility factor. And then, if you can even go one step ahead and get those influencers, the actual influencers, beyond the vanity metrics of how many likes they have on Instagram, using the science of mapping networks, SNA,
Yeah.
social network analysis, understanding the edges and who is really influencing who, and work with them, understand those tribes, and then influence them. I think this would be the perfection, in my opinion. Yeah.
I
Yeah,
understand.
Yeah, yeah.
no, go ahead, Martina. I was going to ask you.
Yes, and
That.
just to add something to what Ale was saying, one thing that we have been joking about is that during all these years, we have stretched and strengthened a power, which is the identification power. Like brands and CMOs and the C-suite should identify with the audience that they are studying and that they want to reach too, and that's where you go, and you are not just being a utility service or brand, as Ale was saying, but you are just there. You're culturally sensitive, and it's not a superpower. It's something that comes from data. It just takes the right people to pull up those data and to pull up the strings of all those data together. So yeah, sorry, Yogesh, you go.
No. I'm glad you brought that point out, because I think the corollary to that is also how is a brand impacting identity of their customer also, right? And in this context of taboo and stigma, identity is a major component of who they are and how they think they're being perceived. So I'm just curious that with your protocols that you've got, are you tapping into an understanding of that part of it? I'm curious to hear that part of it from you.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a big deal. Identity is probably if we make a word cloud between me and my team, is one of the things that happens. Twice a day, we talk about identity.
Yeah.
It's, we work a lot with lifestyle brands and fashion brands, and, is absolutely connected to the identity. What do I think about myself? What do I want to show? And the older rules of the tribes, that is, how can I fit in within a tribes, and how can I stand out at the same time? It's all in this tension and equation, right? Identity that is developed.
Yeah.
You cannot obviously. It's easier to be observed through, in real life ethnography or in digital ethnography, observing those people, in forums, especially if they're anonymous like Reddit and so on, but also within, the comments of TikTok and so on. So it's easier to find there. It's in in-depth interviews, there's a way to take them on a journey, be very observational, as opposed to ask direct questions, because there's always that bias of wanting to show their best self, and we don't want to have that best self. We want to have their truest self, if you will.
Right.
Martin, want to add anything on the identity
side?
As
I was thinking about the connection between identity and brand, and how also the progression of the interaction with the customer, with the audience that we do, needs to be set up in a way that for us at least, the product question doesn't come in the beginning. It needs to be a progression, because if you ask upfront about product, I mean, if it's just a survey, if it's a one shot, one thing, we usually don't do those, but it can happen. But if you really want to have the full picture, it's also about how you progress into asking people. It's not what you ask, but the sequence of those questions that really matter. That's part of the protocols too. Yeah. And we were reflecting with Ale recently that all the questions about products and the connection between, the potential connection between identity and product all come at the end of the interviews or the surveys, because you need to create a relationship and to observe something else to then reach whatever conclusion you want to reach about product and identity. And that's something really fascinating.
I mean, shocker, right? I'm going to be very punk and provocational here, but do we really care about brands so much? Or is it before, what comes first is our life story, is our feelings, is our emotions, is our everything else. And
Mhm.
then there's a tiny little part, sorry, to break the news.
Right.
Um, there is the brands, and the brands have the opportunity to get right there,
Mhm.
not at the beginning of the path.
So I hear you. I get what you're saying, but I think there's also a flip side to that part of the conversation, which is that there are some consumers who will say they look at a brand that, let's say, it's stigmatized. I'll pick an
Mhm.
example just to make the point.
Yeah, yeah,
Adult
yeah.
sex toys. Let's take adult sex toys for a second. There's some people who have no issue talking about it. They'll buy it. They don't care. There are others who are going to be very discreet about it because they're worried about perception.
Yeah.
There'll be others who may be interested but are not sure whether they should or not. And then there are others who are like, nope, this is not for me. We'll never touch it. Right?
Yeah.
That's the spectrum that's there. So in the world of identity and the work you're doing, I'm curious to hear, how do you address those
Mhm.
who are or how would you help a brand who's trying to attract the people who are discreetly using it, or those who are on the fence and not sure whether they should or not? How would your protocols help move people along that journey, so to speak?
Absolutely. It's a great question, actually. In short, I would try to get the signals of normalization of these
Mhm.
cultural codes, right? There are going to be signals of normalization of the sex toys amongst the millions of tribes and communities that are
Yeah,
talking,
yeah.
right? Outside there. And if you it's a that segmentation applies to every brand, every product, because we
Mhm.
always have a cone with the pioneers, with the the cult consumers on top, and then we have the norm at the bottom. So
Yeah.
if we want to think about the central part of those consumers of sex toys, I
Mhm.
will go into the tribes and communities and observe those first few signals of normalization, where from the top of the cone is getting right there.
Interesting. So when you think about the normalization process, either people buy into it or they don't buy into it, and there's going to be friction that's there. So how do you figure that part of it out?
So let me give you another example. When
Yeah.
we were studying death care, death is a by definition a big taboo. We
Yeah.
don't want to talk about death because we're scared of dying. It's
Mm.
the least thing we want to talk about. But because we had this relationship with an amazing CEO, shout out to Tom Wustenberg, and the group that wanted to transform the industry, the transformation architects, we
Mhm.
went on a journey of trying to understand how death care is being normalized and how death has been normalized among Gen Z. And you'd be surprised, but there were all sort of cultural codes that are being they are changing as we speak. There were people doing the punk bereaver, and there was merch. There was like one of the most popular t-shirt is death, what was that, life, death and taxes, the
Yeah,
only
yeah.
things in life,
That
something
was
like.
the Barbie, the Barbie outtaker or something.
Yeah, it's like,
Yeah.
the Barbie bereaver and so on. So, like, if you go out there and you especially look at the youngest, the young audiences, you're
Mm.
gonna find those cultural signals being changed as we speak. Now, I don't want to vanilla coat everything. I don't want to make it seem simpler than what it is. You need to still weight those signals to
Mhm.
give them the right weight. It's
Mhm.
not the general population. Otherwise, we go back into the woke problem, isn't it? No, we need to weight how much those signals are signals for the future of normalization at the bottom of the cone, but there are signals that are getting there, if that makes sense.
No, it makes a lot of sense. And, death care is a great example
Mm.
because you're right. Nobody wants to talk about it. You worry about, elderly parents. You worry about, other situations that may arise. And you have to kind of like look at the people who deal with that on a, I hate to say this, on an ongoing basis, to know what those signals actually need to be. Because for somebody who's not thinking about that, it's not in their frame of reference, you have no context,
Absolutely. So
right?
what we did there, in fact, was to map the whole journey. Death is not just funerals. It starts
Hmm.
before and it ends after. So we
Yeah.
recruited cultural opinion leaders, so those spokespeople and forerunners of the communities across the whole journey, from
Hmm.
hospice workers, from death doulas. Such a fascinating job, right?
My God.
Yeah, absolutely, we learned so much from them. To funeral operators, to celebrants, but
Hmm.
also religious leaders, to them psychologists that look after the afterwards,
Hmm.
that comes after death care. So by getting all this perspective, we could inform the research on consumers,
Hmm.
bereaved people that just lost somebody, and the funeral operators. Now, the consumers um, have just lost somebody. They don't have this overarching perspective that the professional, especially if they are
Hmm.
representative of the tribes and communities, have. But the consumers have the first hand emotions and experiences, so they are absolutely important. And then the funeral operators are also important because they are going to carry ahead this change that we're seeing the signals, but somebody's going to implement it. And it's not an easy ask, because if you think about it, this is an industry that will never die. We're always going to die. So how do you measure satisfaction of people? Of course people are satisfied with the service they've been given, because they cannot imagine a better reality. So
Hmm.
as consumers, they are absolutely important, but their vision is limited. Well, if we get the professionals that have been dealing with them across the whole journey, we get a 360 view on what the future could look like for them.
Hmm. This is such a fascinating conversation because most people don't think about these kinds of areas. There's so much taboo and stigma associated with it, yet there are businesses that have to operate in it, and they have to figure out how do they offer their value proposition in a way that is sensitive, meets the needs of their customer base. So to go in and to be able to tease that out in the way that you're describing it is pretty fascinating, actually, because it's I don't see it as being, you're right, it's not a traditional market research topic. If you did that, you would end up actually with potentially the wrong set of criteria and assumptions on how to operate.
Absolutely. And you named it. It's assumptions as opposed to reality, isn't it?
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. So yeah, and therein lies the rub. So if we were to go back to the world of ethnography and the things that are currently happening right now, I'm just want to spend a few minutes talking about that, and get your both of your perspectives on this. Actually, I'm thinking about, like, even just the usage of AI. It's become so pervasive.
Mm,
I'm starting to see people talk about the fact that they are now anti-AI
mm,
almost,
mm, 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 mm.
right?
So this is very interesting, actually, quite funny for me because I came full circle. So 10 years ago, yes, I
Yeah.
know. So 10 years ago, I pioneered this concept of a hybrid intelligence. So
Hmm.
I was bringing AI
Hmm.
to the social scientists, to the anthropologists and the
Yeah.
psychologists, to
Yeah.
broaden up their data set, to access millions of profiles, and so on. So lots of evangelists in that sense, let's bring AI in and blah, blah, blah. I was really into it. And AI, as you remember, Yogesh, was very different. It wasn't generative. It was much more, a certainty of
Yeah.
cluster analysis, NLP, if this, then that, much more manageable than
Yeah.
now.
Yeah.
Yet I gave this TED talk, we live in amazing times of opportunities and also challenges. Now, 10 years later, this is funny, I'm doing the opposite. So now I'm bringing humanity into AIs. And now
Mhm.
we helping our clients to essentially instill humanity into their AIs. And I
Mhm.
even founded the lab, the Human AI Lab,
Mhm.
which is a little group of scientists from neuroscience to cultural decoding, to psychology as well, where we study the human AI relationship,
Mhm.
essentially the interaction.
Yeah.
So if you want me to share a case study,
Yeah.
how things have changed, basically we have this client of us is called the Brilliant and Bloom, and they're absolutely brilliant. In fact, it's a group of seasoned advertising experts and the techies that wanted to rewrite the narrative on 50 plus consumers, because 50 plus, and by this I mean if people older than 50 plus, than 50 years old,
Yeah.
they own, the majority of the spending power. They're very influential, yet they get the slightest slice of budget. The narratives are all about decline. Oh, you should retire, and it seems like they're not wealthy or healthy. So it's all BS. I met lots of them. They pretty well, actually.
Yeah.
So we took the challenge of Brilliant and Bloom to help them rewrite those narratives. Now, the challenge technically was this: you guys, tribes, you have to decode 50 plus people
Mhm.
to help us, Brilliant and Bloom, to recode them into synthetic personas.
Mm.
There are ways to do, as you know, Yogesh, because this is also part of your expertise. There's many ways to do it. There's decisions to be made. Is it digital twins or is it synthetic personas? Is it representative of a
Mhm.
segment based on behaviors, or is it representing on demographics? He
Yeah.
requested the research to understand what LLMs already have, because those ones are big competitors for Brilliant and Blue. So as it turns out, LLMs are also flattening this stereotype of 50 plus people, poor people going slowly into death.
Yeah.
And we wanted to create a difference, and it's also an economic and strategic advantage for our client. So we started with AI, actually. Another shout out is to Nina Nozo, our team member, that is a cultural mapper. So she
Mhm.
has millions of profiles. She goes into this SNA and all their art and science, and we could get 7 markets across the world, millions of profiles. You need AI to filter down, because otherwise we wouldn't be able to access all these profiles and cater the 50 final profiles.
Yeah.
So AI very important at the beginning. We could see how people are talking. Based on how people are talking, we could filter down to how wealthy they are, the age they have
Mhm.
roughly, and all these sort of things. So this is great. Now, the second step, though, is to actually interview them. We could have done it with AI, of course,
Mhm.
but we didn't find the AI interviewers able to create that relationship, to let them break those taboos and to essentially decode them in 2 hours conversation about everything. We had the people, Yogesh, crying. We had the people, sharing all sorts of very, very personal things. And I was actually glad that there were humans in front of them with the
Amazing.
right protocol. And then afterwards, and this is quite funny, we could have dumped everything on an LLM and just say, look, give me whatever it is, the analysis of this. But we tested different platforms, and we found out that by having the old way of debriefing the
Yeah.
team together and
Mhm.
connecting the dots,
Yeah.
we did a better job. So you see how am I playing, years ago I was like, yeah, AI can facilitate everything. We need, But now I'm like, well, now we have the opposite problem, the opposite need. How do we keep humanity into AI?
Yeah.
You build the synthetic personas. This is your problem number one. How can you keep the complexity, the emotional, social, cultural, psychological complexity in what you're building, right? Because otherwise, your flattening is going to scale up to the old system you're building, if you see what I mean.
I get that, and I think this is where, um, Martina, I'm just curious to hear your thoughts on this one. Is that you need to be able to know the spectrum for each of those things in terms of the social aspect, the emotional conditioning that's happening. Is that something that you are thinking about from a psychology perspective, or?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Me and whoever works with me of the team in that moment act like safeguards for all of these protocols. I mean, we need to act as safeguards for ourselves too. So
Yeah.
there is someone who is safeguarding someone else all the time in this process, because
Yeah.
whenever we go into a project with Alessia and the rest of the team, the first thing that we need to acknowledge that there are sensitivities here.
Hmm.
And as Ale said, there are those walls, and those walls are completely natural and they need to be accounted for. And we
Yeah.
just don't want to go into something and break everything because, well, we asked witty questions to them, didn't we? No, it doesn't work like that.
Yeah.
So yeah, we are always searching for what are the specifics of those cases, and what are the guidelines, the psychological guidelines, the ethical guidelines to enforce the protocols that we are going to design for that specific project. Because that's the other thing. It's not standardized. I mean, they get standardized, but we are not just using one protocol that fits for all the clients. That just can't happen, because healthcare is completely different from aging. It's completely different from mums or
Yeah.
sex toys and other things. We literally tailor those protocols on the client, but in doing so, we need to have those guardrails and say, okay, where are the real friction, not just the client friction can be there, but where are the ethical friction, the psychological friction, the cultural friction? Because as Ale was saying, the Brilliant and Bloom project, we needed to interact with 7 different markets around the world, from the US to Asia to Europe. And so you can see where I'm going. Even if you have one protocol, you need to adapt it,
100%.
because otherwise you may end up being offensive, especially when you are one-on-one with someone in a 2 hours interview asking them personal questions.
Have you experienced reaching that edge where you're like, oh my gosh, I'm literally, should I or shouldn't I? Is that an example you can give perhaps of what you may have experienced?
I don't think we ever went into offensive territory, or but we were able to ask these people how they felt, and they gave us truthful answers. They gave us belly answers at the end. So I believe that the whole process, this is also a process thing. The whole process needs to account for that final question where you're going to be able to ask for a feedback and actually receive that feedback. We factor that very thing into the whole taboo topic protocol or protocol that we are designing. And that can be tricky, because you as an interviewer or as a team person need to be prepared for that. It's not just I'm going to prepare this material and then it's done. I need to prepare as a professional and as a person in going into those interviews.
And also, can I insert that one interesting thing that we did the early days, Yogesh, was to refuse to study fears.
Yes, thank
we
you.
go that deep. So this is a choice, isn't it?
Yeah.
Why would a brand want to know my fears, and how would you use them? because we get so close to people, Yogesh, because we get people crying, we get people wanting to bond deeply, we get people, really emotionally saying, thank you guys that you gave me the space to finally talk about the death of my mom, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
Because of that, we make some decisions. For instance, we don't exploit fears.
That's incredible. Yeah, I would have never thought about that. And the fact that that's actually a great learning in terms of you have to have guardrails,
Yeah.
because people, not that I would say that people would, that your clients would do it, but there are people who could, and
Yeah.
you have to protect the respondent, the consumer, um, from this kind of potential misuse as well. At the end of the day, I can completely see that as being a situation. In fact, in the work I've done on stigma, one of the things I talk about is there's a subset of consumers or people who are detractors, who
Mm,
actively go out to stigmatize a
Yes.
product or a brand. And if you look at even in the last 12 months, at least from a US perspective, we saw that happen with Cracker Barrel, that restaurant chain, where they just did a
Yeah.
simple rebranding, and look at all the negativity that came from it. Or Bud Light a few years ago,
Yeah.
one
mm,
transgender influencer, one Instagram post, and the the uh, uproar that happened as a consequence of that, right? So if that information gets in the wrong hands, I could very well see people misusing that kind of information.
absolutely. I mean, we worked a lot on with the big legal teams to build those synthetic personas.
Hmm.
It was
Hmm.
out of our comfort zone to be so strict about legal terms,
Yeah.
but nevertheless very important.
Yeah.
That's amazing. So, looking forward now, I think we can all agree that stigma is not going away. It's going to be there. It's going to impact in some ways that's been there for many years and generations. In some cases, it's going to be new stigmas that will emerge. Right? AI being one example, synthetic data also being another one in our world.
Absolutely.
Right?
Did you see
So,
today the reaction of our industry to the biggest qualitative research published
mhm.
by
Mhm.
Anthropic? I mean, it speaks, everybody got fired up.
Yep.
It speaks to our most intrinsic fears of being replaced, right?
Exactly.
80,000 people, something. So,
Yep.
yes, absolutely. AI can be a stigma for sure. Yeah.
So, what's that one thing that could be a cultural shift that could happen, right? That brand leaders should be aware of, we should be aware of, based on from your vantage point, what would you say that is? What's that one thing for the two of you?
Yeah. So with the Human AI Lab, we observe in this tension between offloading and trust, right? So offloading to AI and erosion of trust because of that. So we are, let me give you a practical example. I'm guilty of that. So I'm not pointing the finger to other people who are doing that. I'm drafting emails with AI. I receive long parts, and I sometimes, sum up here
Mm,
and there. I get to AI to brainstorm ideas, to
mm,
generate ideas. I do address the complexity of human beings. My husband has said this or that, what does it mean, and so on, right?
yeah.
So you're offloading a lot, and offloading is really appealing because it's, life is so complex. So we have this help, finally, thank God, of AI to address this complexity, and we offload. But
Mhm.
while we're offloading, we're receiving tons of more of emails, fake emails, slop everywhere. You
Yeah.
see, so this creates a natural mistrust. So
Yeah.
every time, we scrutinize, we don't even open many emails anymore. So it's very interesting that we are in this tension. The more we offload, the less we trust, and so on and so forth. So my advice for the leaders that are listening to this right now is this: sit in the middle of this tension and find a way to still build the trust in an ocean on offloading, because that's the leadership of the future, actually.
Amazing, amazing. Martina, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I would actually love to add something about the C-suite and how the CEOs and the CMOs may navigate all of these. And here are, Alessia already mentioned them a couple of examples, like Tom Bustenberg, but also the CEO of Brilliant and Blue, Mark Watkins. These are people that I can take as example for being bold in trusting their gut feeling about their own industry, even though the satisfaction scores, for example, of the healthcare industries were completely contradicting Tom's gut feeling, like, oh no, everything is okay. You don't need to, transform an industry. Those people have been bold, but at the same time, the other one thing I would say is be informed. Just look for the teams, look for the people that are going to help you get informed. Get informed yourself, and then look for the people who are nerd enough to go deep inside all of that amount of data, because there is a treasure trove to be found right there.
Amazing, amazing. So we're at the top of the hour. So my very last question, very simple one: where can people find you so they can reach out to you for topics like this that they could be potentially looking for help from you on? Where would they find you?
Absolutely. So they can find us on LinkedIn first, as we are also live on LinkedIn. Trybes is TRYBES agency. And also, we have the website, emails, and so forth. But I also want to say, I mentioned a couple of people. There was Leila Green, F-Mom Guild. There's a newsletter, and she's also on LinkedIn. I mentioned the Transformation Architects, also LinkedIn. Amazing people that make sure that insights have an impact and actual transformation. Brilliant and Bloom as well is on LinkedIn. Who else did we mention? Nina knows.
Nina, yeah.
So, you got a bunch of nerds and amazing people to contact.
Amazing, amazing. Well, Martina, Alessia, thank you so much for being part of the show today. It was absolutely eye-opening for me. I can't thank you enough for you making the time to come on the show today. So thank you. And for everybody else, you will be back in a couple of weeks. Just stay tuned on my channel. You'll see the next post that comes out. Thank you, and have a great weekend.
Thank you for having us.